Hello, everyone. Let me try that again. Hello, everyone. My name is Mocha. Your name is not Mocha, but I bet you wish that it was Mocha. Nonetheless, today we will be looking at two events. Well, not really events. I suppose that they could be classified as events, but in reality, they're really not like real. Like, hey, here's an extravaganza of an event. Here's a 3 hour event. Whenever you think of an event, you think of something like, oh, it's a funeral, right? Or it's a birthday party. Or some people would classify an event to be something to the effect of a basketball game, but that's only if you're like a moron, like, only morons like basketball games and stuff of that nature. But if you're not a moron, then you tuned in to the Gut Wrench podcast. Thank you all so much for joining me. And once again, my name is Mocha. We're going to get this show on the road. We're going to be looking, as I said, at two events. One in particular that's going to take us... Now, if you'll remember last week, we looked at... the SummerSlam 04. However, there's a few things that I left off, simply because I didn't have enough. I thought to myself, I'm not going to have enough time to really, tell them the entirety of the story of how we got to this point. I'm not really going to be able to, convey the openness of that story into an hour-long podcast. And then, also, I forgot that it was Thursday. So, for those of you who don't know, which is like a wide majority of you, if not all of you, I start recording this podcast on Thursdays. The reason being is so that I can start the pay-per-view event, and then afterwards, not only do I start it, but I get about halfway through it, if not more than halfway through it, so that I can finish it on Friday and have it up by Saturday, if that makes sense, because this does come on Saturday mornings, and had that been the case, I forgot that it was Thursday, and I scrambled to get this done. Right now it's 9:30, like p.m., and after this I'm probably just going to go to sleep. Just because I got work in the morning, a whole bunch of scheduling things that I got to deal with. Hang on, I got a fucking frog in my throat or something. Feels like there's a bug crawling up my throat, up my esophagus, and it's just jumping, and it's jumping. I know that sounds extremely disgusting and probably weird, but this is not the bug jumping out of my throat podcast. This is the Gut Wrench podcast, and I would like to thank you all for joining me this week. The anniversary show is coming up. It will be on the first Saturday of October, and I don't know what I'm going to do yet. I'm juggling two ideas. One is a 2-hour extravaganza, there's that word again, of an event, where I actually do a 2-hour podcast instead of it being 1 hour like it usually is. But then I had a thought. And my thought was, who's going to sit there and listen for 2 hours as I ramble about professional wrestling that's not relevant to today's wrestling world? And the conclusion that I came up with was nobody. Nobody wants to sit down and listen to a 28-year-old boy, crossbreed between the two, actually listen to a 2-hour wrestling podcast. Or for that matter, if I was to, I had a few ideas. Hour number 1 would be about witchcraft, and then hour number 2 would be about, pro wrestling, or vice versa. And at the same time, that still wouldn't work, that would be formatted really weirdly. And that sounds like a lot of work And I would probably have to cancel one of the episodes because all I have is 6 hours to work with on top of that. So I do apologize for what you might say is stalling right now. We're 5 minutes in and I have yet to get to the real meat and potatoes of what today's episode is. I'm going to check my phone gallery really fast and I'm going to show you the updated rankings on the AEW website so that we can take it from there. Because today we are not talking about AEW. However, I feel as though that it is extremely important for me to try my best to stay relevant in what is the today's here and now. So had that been the case, here's my attempt at trying to stay relevant at the here and now. Now, most of you know who Jim Cornette is. Jim Cornette must be smoking crack. He must have cleared the ocean as far as drugs go, because he has one of the worst tastes in professional wrestling history. He used to manage a man by the name of the Mountie. The Mountie would come out dressed as a Royal Guard Canadian mounted officer, and I don't even know if he rode a horse or not, but that's not even the point. The point is that the Mountie was the most generic scene wrestler, if that's what you want to call him, or entertainer, because back in the 90s, the WWE went through this phase where everybody had a job or everybody had a character. For instance, the person that's 7 foot tall, or that's what his build was. He was probably around 6'3", 6'2 and a half, 325 pounds, even though it's probably like 280 pounds, but that's not the point. They exaggerate everything, and I mean everything. Like, you go to the Allstate Arena, and let's say that I'm going to put this in air quotes, sold out the Allstate Arena. They'll tell you that there's 47,526 people in attendance, when in reality, there's probably 9,200 people in attendance. At best, maybe 5,000. But anyway, had that been the case, like I said, this 6.5 foot monster that they billed as Kane used to play a dentist. And his name was like Isaac Yankem. They had another one, Duke the Dumpster Trash Man. He would come out with like a trash can. It sounds like my job that I do at Walmart, but whenever I go into their building, I don't come out with like a trash can, Well, I come out of like a lot of doors with like trash cans, or trash bags, but that's not the point. Whenever I'm back there, I'm actually trying to get my job done. I don't go there with the intent of holding an empty aluminum trash can or trash can lid. The point that I'm trying to make is that everybody had a job, and it was more of an occupational wrestler. Like, who's going to win between the Royal Guard Mountie or the dentist? Oh boy, I can't wait. Back in that day, that's where Jim Cornette, and like I said, the most generic bullshit you would have ever seen in your entire life. Today's wrestling is so much better than anything cartoony that they had in the 80s and the late 70s. So, why are we talking about Jim Cornette? It's very simple, you see. Little Johnny, I'm glad that you asked. Because I have, with me, something that this man said over Twitter, apparently. No, he said it over his podcast, rather. Look at that. Now, shout out to Jim Cornette's podcast, The Jim Cornette Experience. You should really go check it out. Bleh. He said, I paid attention under 1 minute and 15 seconds. They, Jon Moxley and Brody King, went to the floor, and I just said, well, it shows an explicit. They got the F, and then they got the UCK, sort of like blurred out. I said, F it. Moxley's the worst wrestler in the world, and I tried to fast forward to the finish, but AEW can't manage time, so they almost ran over. Okay. So basically what he's saying, it sounds like he's saying that AEW ran out of time on their show that they had, and that the match between Jon Moxley and Brody King, Jon Moxley and Brody King, for whatever reason, ran over the accumulated time. But if that's his only, like, that's what the paragraph says. Looks like a paragraph. It's like 4 to 5.5 sentences, 4.5 sentences. So, had that been the case, and if that's what he's saying, if that's his only quarrel with the match, it doesn't exactly sound like that, quote, Jon Moxley is the worst professional wrestler that he's ever seen, or for that matter, that he's ever had the pleasure of watching or dealing with. Jon Moxley, for those of you who don't know, because I do have people who aren't really wrestling fans, has been ranked number 1 in many circuits. Jon Moxley is honestly a machine. He was ranked number 1 in tag team wrestling back in his CZW days, Combat Zone Wrestling. And that was in tag team action, him and another guy named Sami Callihan, who goes by the Death Machine. Sami Callihan, who is he's something in Impact Wrestling now, but they used to call themselves the Switchblade Conspiracy. And I suppose that I'm getting off topic here, and we still haven't gotten to the show that we're going to watch. But sticking with the whole, hey, I want to stay relevant with the times and what's happening and not really talk about what happened 20 years ago, just to play a nostalgia trip for my fans, and for that matter for people who, maybe missed it and now they're caught up on it, even though it took them 20 years too late. That's okay. The power rankings in the men's championship division are as follows. In as far as AEW goes, the major champion, the world champion, CM Punk, newly won world title as of like last month, maybe, or 2 months ago. It looks like the interim world champion, Jon Moxley. So they might be having a little bit of a dispute here, Jon Moxley and CM Punk. See, that's what I like to see. The interim world champion. So Moxley has found himself apparently in a position, from what I'm reading here, that he never lost a championship title shot. And for that matter, like, I've seen this before, where, let me take you back to an episode that I did, Impact Wrestling, where for whatever reason, Bobby Roode and James Storm were the world champions, but for whatever reason, the Broskis, or the, can't remember their names, because I never watched fucking Impact Wrestling growing up. But the Bromans, there it is. It's not the Bromance, it's the Bromans. And see, what had happened was they were the interim world champions, or tag champions rather. But what had happened was, even though they were the interim world tag team champions, they had yet to actually win the championships. They just never lost their title. And we've seen it WrestleMania 10, where Razor Ramon never lost his championship, but Shawn Michaels came out and declared himself the Intercontinental Champion, despite the fact that he hadn't beat Razor, or he had beaten him in a competition beforehand, and there was a lot of dispute as to whether or not the title was on the line or something. It was something like that. They were both walking around with championships, and no one knew who their real champion was. But as far as I could see, it was Razor Ramon who was the Intercontinental Champion at that time. Anyway, I'm getting off subject. Nice little history lesson, and it's just from me to you. I'm telling you the craft that I've learned and understood. I feel like I could be a fucking general manager at this point. But anyway, the TNT champion is Wardlow, and the All-Atlantic champion is Pac. That bastard Pac. The contenders are, number one contender would be Scorpio Sky for... It really doesn't list them, but I would assume CM Punk or Jon Moxley. Hangman Page would be number two. Once again, I feel like Hangman should be the interim world champion because it's Moxley who... not Moxley, it's he should take Moxley's place because CM Punk and Hangman already had their dispute. I don't remember hearing anything about Moxley. It's not important, I guess. It's neither here nor there. I'm trying to get to what's happening, 20 years ago. I don't know why. Jay Lethal is number 3. Orange Cassidy being number 4, and with probably one more win, they got like a green arrow beside of Cassidy's name, he would probably move up to number 3. So they would probably put Cassidy against Lethal somewhere else. And Powerhouse Hobbs, who I was told was he undefeated or is he undefeated? It doesn't really say, but that's not important, I guess. And that's the men's championship, the way that they're looking. So, if I'm right, it should be Scorpio Sky, either against CM Punk or Moxley. Hangman Adam Page against either the All-Atlantic champion, Pac, which I would highly doubt, because Pac, from what I understand, the All-Atlantic championship can only be defended, in the UK. Seems like a pretty stupid rule to me, but, they're recording stuff over there, so they're like, hey, let's make this territory relevant, The TNT champion, Wardlow, would probably have his number one contender be either Jay Lethal or Orange Cassidy. We go over here to the women, where the woman's world champion, Thunder Rosa, is the number one contender, or is the champion, rather, Thunder Rosa. Mitsu, yep. Okay, well, I don't speak Japanese. Is the number one contender probably for a champion of her choosing, or of, Thunder Rosa. If I was her, I wouldn't go for Jade Cargill, though, because it looks like that Jade is probably going to wipe the floor with everyone that she faces, because every time that you see her, she just squashes anybody. She reminds me of Charlotte Flair in a lot of ways. Toni Storm is number 2 on that list. Chris Statlander is number 3. Nyla Rose is number 4. Serena Deeb being number 5. And had it been me, I would have put Rose at number 5 and Deeb at number 4. Because, to my knowledge, the Professor has been undefeated. The World Tag Team Champions, the Young Bucks, or Super Kick Party, or Generation Me, whoever, whatever you want to call them. Their number one contenders are FTR. That stands for Fuck the Revival. It's sort of an inside joke. Because whenever they were with the WWE, their names were The Revival. And now that they're no longer with the WWE, they're basically saying, fuck our past. Powerhouse Hobbs and Ricky Starks is number 2. Keith Lee and Swerve Strickland is number 3. Alex Reynolds and John Silver is number 4, and Private Party comes in at number 5. Who knows who the fuck that is? I don't keep up. And this is as of what it go to the next picture, July 13th, 2022. Also, here here's the next picture that I seen whenever I scrolled over. Students need 6 to 8 hours of sleep. School. 6 minus 8 equals -2. Because they got the hyphen 6 to 8 hours, but they're using it as like a minus sign. And then below it says, "This was all a trick. I deceived you." And I don't think that they deceived anyone, but that's okay. That's fine by me. They didn't deceive me, that's for damn sure, and I hope to God that Morgan doesn't call right now. But anyway, hello everyone, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, and if you are a child, I do apologize for dropping the F-bomb earlier. Fuck the revival, you know. Oh, did it again. Whoops. Only do it whenever it's relevant to the story that I'm telling. 7/15/2004. Now, before we looked at, last week, we actually did, like I said, wasn't really able to tell you the entirety of that story of, what it was that we were basically looking at. I do apologize that I wasn't able to tell you the entirety of the story that we were looking at. But now I'm going to fill in the pieces. If you have to watch listen to last week's episode after listening to this one, and everything should come full circle. Highlights from last week as Cena accidentally bumps Angle and gets stripped of the U.S. title. So here's what happens. John Cena goes for a clothesline, and as he puts his stiff arm out and he's about to hit Booker T with the clothesline, they're showing highlights from what happened the week before, 7/15/2004. But as Cena comes in with that clothesline, he hits general manager Kurt Angle, and then Angle gets up, he basically grabs a microphone, he says, stop, ring the bell. John Cena, I told you, I gave you a warning last time that you put your fucking hands on me. And then he said, now it's personal. He said, I'm going to strip you of your United States Championship. Ring the bell and bring me the title. So basically, this was John Cena versus Booker T for the United States Championship. However, it ended in kind of a screwy way. We'll just say that. So the screwy way that it ended, and then the next, whenever they're done with like their intro and stuff like that, we get like this 9-minute segment with Booker T, Rene Dupree, and Kenzo Suzuki. And no, it's not supposed to rhyme, but it does. And they're all in the ring. And like I said, it's just a 9-minute segment. They're trying to stall for time. It's very clear what they're doing. They're like, oh, somebody didn't make their flight. Somebody didn't, do the darn thing that they were supposed to do. Get out there. John Cena's going to be here any minute. He's not here right now. I'm on the phone with him. Like he's at the airport. He's trying to get here. And it was all like just and almost like immediately at the 10-minute mark, 10 minutes and like 15 seconds. So you think you're untouchable. Word life. It's a basic thugonomics. John Cena comes out and he splits all their chops. He says, well, it looks like we got the remake of the Wizard of Oz. And then he ends up saying something along the lines of, but we're not in Kansas anymore. We're in Providence, Rhode Island. And then they just go, yeah, like they're going crazy. Someone said our hometown name. Oh no. Oh, he must love us. He must really love us. Anyway, the segment, the segment should have been, so, in my opinion, it should have been in later. It shouldn't have been the opening segment. Had it been me, I would have put a wrestling match in front of this, because the wrestling match would have stalled for more time, rather than having Kenzo Suzuki, Booker T, and Rene Dupree, all three out there. Once again, that wasn't supposed to rhyme, but unfortunately it did. Having all three of these competitors out there talking about the fact that they deserve a shot at the United States Championship, or the fact that Booker T says that he never lost the United States Championship title match opportunity that he had last week. saying something to the effect of like, hey, I didn't lose anything. Booker makes a few good points, is what they say on commentary. I didn't lose, so I guess that technically means that I won. So maybe I should be awarded the United States title. It's basically what Booker T comes out and says. And then we get John Cena, who says that if he's not going to get his United States Championship back, he's going to walk that yellow brick road, his words, not mine. And then he said he's going to get into Kurt Angle's face, and then he's going to basically force him to give him his United States Championship back. So Cena goes into Kurt Angle's office, he breaks down the door, and then Kurt Angle's in a wheelchair, and he's got like a cast on his leg, and he's been faking, believe it or not, this injury for like weeks and weeks at a time. And now he's the general manager of SmackDown, and he's just throwing his weight around, and eventually he would get fired like a week after this. But that's not the point. He ends up just saying, now, John Cena, you wouldn't hit someone in a wheelchair, would you? And then he ends up picking him up, and then he says, you're not in a wheelchair anymore. And then he starts to beat on him, but then Luther Reigns comes in out of nowhere, and he starts almost like pummeling John Cena. Cena gets the better of Reigns and puts him through a wall. And Cena has the best line that I've ever heard in my entire life. Even though he just got ambushed by Luther Reigns, 290 pounds of just pure brute force, like 6'2.5", looks like he could probably play football, even though I hate football. He doesn't belong in a wrestling ring is what I'm trying to say. But anyway, he goes ahead and Cena puts him through a wall, and after putting him through the drywall, he says, the next time you do that, he says, you better wipe your feet before you come into my house. And then I'm just like, God, okay. You almost got your ass handed to you there, Cena, but it's okay. He makes like a lot of like Wizard of Oz references while he's out there, though. John Cena calls Kenzo's interpreter, because Kenzo Suzuki is from Japan and he doesn't speak English. I'm going to put that in air quotes because later on he can be seen speaking English. Whenever he looks at Booker T and says, can you dig that, sucker? Like I said, this is peak, just SmackDown, peak WWE, and oh my God, this headache. I've had a headache all day today, and it's not went away, but like I said, enough with my medical problems. He ends up looking, basically, saying that Dorothy's in the ring, but she went a little too heavy on the makeup. Of course, talking about Kenzo Suzuki's interpreter, who has like all this white blush on her face for whatever reason. I'm not really sure why. It's some Japanese tradition, I'm sure. But anyway, Dorothy went a little bit too heavy on the makeup. Booker would make a great Scarecrow because he clearly has no brains. And then Booker T ends up getting upset about that. He's like, Michael Cole would represent the Lollipop Kids. Of course he would, because we have to pick on Michael Cole. The Rock used to do it, and now Michael Cole was at commentary desk, and then he was like, that's nice. And Taz was just like, hey, Cole, you got your airtime or something like that. He was just laughing at him. And he calls Rene Dupree the, quote, cowardly Frenchman, because, of course, he's from France, Paris, France, and whenever he comes out, he's got this poodle with him, and he tells this referee, the guy standing like right outside the ring, I guess he's a timekeeper or referee or an official of some sort, he says, here, hold my Fifi. Did you just tell him to hold your dick? Like, what? Anyway, the cowardly Frenchman, Cena puts Luther Reigns through a wall, and then he says, this is my house. Wipe your feet before you come in next time. Yeah, which we just got done talking about. And the first match was Rey Mysterio and Spike Dudley versus Jamie Noble and Chavo Guerrero, and I give it 3.5 out of 5 stars. I never thought that I'd rate a Jamie Noble match that high, give him more than 2 or 3 stars at a time. And before the match begins, we get the usual So while they're making their entrances, we get this, someone ends up saying, and this episode of SmackDown is brought to you by, and then they show what it's brought to you by. One of those things that it's brought to you by is Coinstar. And Taz, on commentary, ends up saying something along the lines of, you give us your coins, we'll give you your cash. I'm like, okay, well, I mean, that's wonderful, I guess. And at least I'm getting my cash. I mean, I didn't know where else to go in order to get my cash, But the only thing that I got to do is I got to give you some coins. I'm sold. Why can't I just keep my coins? I don't know. I'm just rambling at this point and making bad jokes. Okay, so what ends up happening is Spike screams, leave me alone, to his former family, because even though he, quote, didn't ask for their help, the Dudley boys come out and then they help Spike Dudley in one way or another. Anyway, now if you'll remember, last week we talked about the fact that Spike Dudley was calling the shots, or at least if I didn't talk about it, I meant to talk about it, the fact that it was all a ruse. Spike would be seen winning matches in devious fashion, and then he would try to tell the Dudley boys to leave him alone, that he's his own man now, and that he doesn't need their help to get by in this world. And, he just wants to live his life and be his own man. Well, Spike Dudley would then turn on his then tag team partner, Rey Mysterio, more than 2 weeks, and he would end up winning the Cruiserweight title to set up for Rey Mysterio versus Spike. Never mind. It was a 6-man tag team match, if I remember correctly. Paul London and Billy Kidman, and Rey Mysterio to face off against the Dudleys, if I remember correctly. I'm trying not to look at my notes because I know that I'm going to lose my place on where I'm at right now. And it honestly makes sense that that would be the case, because right after this, we get a 3-on-1 handicap match where Rene Dupree, Booker T, and Kenzo Suzuki, once again, that's not me trying to rhyme their names. I tried to put this on my piece of paper in a way that it wouldn't rhyme. Kenzo Suzuki, Booker T, Rene Dupree. Then I was like, okay, those last two still rhyme. Booker T, Rene Dupree, and Kenzo Suzuki. That's the most rhyme. And Kenzo Suzuki, why can't I just call him Suzuki, Booker T, Rene Dupree? Once again, those I don't know how to win, okay? So stop, leave me alone. Versus John Cena in a 3-on-1 handicap match. And it's an elimination match. And I hate these multi-man matches. Absolutely hate them. This one was over in a flash, luckily. But usually they take forever to get to the conclusion because they have to build up so much steam and so much shtick has to be done in order to make you think that the hero's not going to win or that the villain's going to lose. Usually there's just so much stick that makes you think that, they're doing the thing again. And back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and in the tag. You want to know what would make this match go extremely faster instead of it being an elimination match? You take Rene Dupree, you put him in one corner. You take Booker T, you put him in that same corner. And then you take Kenzo Suzuki, and then you put him in that same corner. Now, all three of these men at one time to work over John Cena. Practically just a 3-on-1 beatdown. Instead of it being, okay, well now it's my turn in the ring, and now I'll just tag you in, and then you'll come in, and then I'll go out. No, this is not a tag team match. This is a handicap match. This was meant to punish John Cena. And Kurt Angle, before this match begins, ends up being seen behind the scenes in the locker room saying something along the lines of, this is going to be a night that John Cena is never going to forget. And boy, was he right. Because after Kenzo gets eliminated, Rene Dupree gets eliminated, which, by the way, Rene Dupree was always, the most annoying and the worst jobber that John Cena's ever had to work with. Whenever it comes to like working with someone, the most obnoxious person you will ever meet in your entire life. And it's not stories that I've heard or anything like that. It's not thing that I've read. It's just the fact that every time that you see him on TV, or for that matter, social media too, social media posts, especially later on throughout the years, would be something like he would give his relevant opinion on stuff that, like, it would mean something if he was somebody, but unfortunately for him, he's a nobody. You know, if you give your irrelevant opinion on things and you're a nobody, and nobody really gives a flying hoot nanny about your opinion, then you're just wasting your breath. And he said recently that the product is getting stale, and then I'm like, okay. And like that's cool, but do you want to contribute to the problem or the solution here? Do you want to call them up and tell them, I'm going to put this in air quotes, how to fix their problem? If you seem to think that that there's some sort of lack of communication or some sort of problem, I do apologize, ladies and gentlemen. I've got the biggest headache, and I've had it since work. And I've got this fucking light on, and this light, let me tell you, it's just amplifying the headache even more. So I'm trying to get through this. I'm trying so that I can go to sleep. Eddie Guerrero with a passionate promo. And I wish that I could understand even half of what he's saying, because I don't speak Spanish. But he basically says for all the Vutas out there that he's going to win. And whenever he does win, he's going to have basically a La Fiesta, a big celebration, a grandiose party. And whenever he wins his match, which is, believe it or not, it's a cage match for the WWE Championship. So this is back whenever wrestling was actually like peak wrestling, back whenever you could do whatever it is that you would want to do in a situation where you would want to do it, and you wouldn't get called out on it. Eddie Guerrero with a passionate promo, and I like the fact that they give Eddie a promo spot, but they don't give the champion, JBL, much of any promo spots. Not even whenever they go to commercial break do they even acknowledge the fact that their champion doesn't have a promo spot. Usually they'll be like, and here live on WWE.com, here's what happened. In case you missed it, JBL had some words for Eddie Guerrero. Oh man, just a yawn. I thought I had to sneeze. Anyway, Devon Dudley faces off against Paul London, who is one half of the tag team champions, thanks to the fact that he defeated, no more than 2 weeks ago, or no more than a week ago or so, he defeated, him and Billy Kidman, Paul London and Billy Kidman, defeated the Dudley Boys. And on top of that, not only did they defeat the Dudley Boys, but they won the tag team titles in fashion too. And I give it 2.5 out of 5 stars, and I would have given it 3, but Michael Cole, here I am watching this beautiful contest against Devon Dudley and Paul London, and had it been me, I would have booked Bubba Ray to be in this match, not Devon. The reason being is because usually all you see is Bubba Ray as the one-on-one competitor. You really don't see Devon do much of anything, except in tag team action. But I guess that's just me. I would have put Bubba Ray, unless of course he was hurt and there's something that I don't know. Oh man, I swear. So unless he's like hurt and there's something that they didn't tell me or something that I don't know about, I would have taking Devon out, put Bubba Ray in. I give it 2.5 stars out of 5. And now we get our first time in SmackDown history. The WWE Championship will be defended in a steel cage match. I love JBL, and I hate to say this, Tony Chimel gets his, as he's coming out to the ring. I understand why he did it, but I still don't approve of it. Tony Chimel gets his hometown wrong. So sometimes WWE wrestlers, or for that matter, any wrestler at all, in order to sell a character, they'll go ahead and they'll evolve a little bit. Take, for example, The Undertaker, who it says that he's from, quote, Death Valley. He's not from Death Valley. That just makes him sound intimidating. You know, because he lives in a fucking desert called Death Valley, and no one's going to... Like, that's not real, though. He doesn't live in Death Valley. Tony Chimel gets JBL's hometown wrong. This man is not from New York City, despite the fact that he comes out dressed, you know, in nice clothes, and for whatever reason, you know, he hit it big on the stock market the one time, and he's got a best-selling author book, and he comes out and he waves to the people, and he talks in a Texas accent. That's because he's from Texas, you dumbass. I understand in order to sell a character that you're going to say from New York City, New York. No, he's not. He's Google it. He's from Texas. I'm not sure. He might be from Wichita Falls for all I know. But it's not the point. He's from Texas. He's not from New York. And another man from Texas. Whenever JBL comes out, he comes out in this limo that's got like these bull horns on it. And it's so funny because you can tell that he's trying so hard to disguise the fact that he's not from New York, that he's from Texas. Because only a Texan would come out with bull horns on their fucking limo. It's hilarious. But, you know, whenever you're from New York, I guess you drive a limo. It's kind of like a cross between the two. Texan and New Yorker, even though I'm pretty sure that wouldn't like mesh well together if I was to fuse the two. I don't exactly see aspects of a Texan being that of a New Yorker. As much as I would love to ramble more about, you know, Texas versus New York, I really can't do that right now. So anyway, JBL comes out in this limo, and the limo driver that opens his door, looks like he's dead inside. And JBL, whenever he's coming out to the ring, looks like he's seen a fucking ghost whenever he's looking at that, he's looking at that cage, and then he's like, oh no, I'm gonna be trapped in there with a psychopath like Eddie Guerrero. Eddie Guerrero, once they come back from their commercial break, on Peacock, the only thing that it does is it fades to black and then it comes back. But anyway, whenever they come back from their, I'm going to put this in air quotes again, commercial break, JBL's limo is nowhere to be found. And the next thing that you hear is Viva la Raza. I lie, I cheat, I steal. I lie, I cheat, I steal, yo. And then the next thing that you hear after that is making his way from El Paso, Texas. Of course he's from Texas. Everyone here is from Texas. May as well call this a Texas match. But anyway, once Eddie comes out in this nice, red, hot-looking lowrider, which they move during the match. I'm not really sure why. Whenever a wrestler makes their entrance, they don't exactly leave the same way that they came in, all except for maybe like The Undertaker, who used to ride a bike, like a motorcycle, to the ring. Whenever he used to ride this motorcycle, it was extremely funny, extremely hilarious to see, you know, oh, okay, he's done kicking ass, so I guess he's just going to ride his motorcycle up there. instead of just walking past the motorcycle and then being like, oh, fuck it, I'll come back and get it during the commercial break. But everyone else, except for The Undertaker, I don't understand. You know, like if your opponent was to get there in a lowrider, you would figure that they would leave in a lowrider or anything else for that matter. Like I said, Kurt Angle's faking this injury though, basically to get sympathy and to get himself into a position of power rather, so that he can basically manipulate people to do exactly what it is that he wants. Now, you wouldn't know that unless, of course, you were to sit down and actually watch the story unfold in front of you. Me, myself, I didn't know that at the time, and for that matter, I wasn't watching SmackDown back then. I was told, because my mom hates wrestling, that I'm allowed to watch one show a week, and I chose the Monday Night Raw, not the Thursday Night SmackDown. However, had that been the case, this match got 4 out of 5 stars from me, despite the shitty ending. Like I said, Kurt Angle faking an injury. There's someone that was dressed up as one of, I'm going to put this in air quotes, Eddie Guerrero's best friends. Because 2 weeks ago, whenever Eddie Guerrero faced off against JBL in a non-title match, there's this certain person who showed up, a masked wrestler, whose name is eluding me right now, El Grande or something like that, even though he's not very big. You know, they just needed a name for the guy, I guess. But anyway, once he comes out, Eddie wants to know who it is. And the part that gets me is Eddie already knew who it was if it was the same person that did it 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, like I said, from this date, they showed highlights of the fact that Eddie Guerrero beat JBL in a non-title match due to the interference of one of his, quote, best friends. The fact was that he was wearing a mask and you couldn't tell who it was. Eddie, for whatever reason, you know, he's got Eddie's mannerisms. I'm not really sure how else to put it, but there was some confusion as to who's under the mask. Who's under the mask? Why can't you tell me who's under the mask? And he ended up beating JBL in a non-title match. Well, had that been the case, fast forward like 2 weeks later, and now JBL's got himself in a sort of a pickle, if you think about it. The champion JBL has to fight someone in a cage match due to Eddie Guerrero's stipulation after winning at the Great American Bash. The stipulation was that if Eddie Guerrero loses at the Great American Bash, that Eddie Guerrero got to pick the match type that he would face in a rematch. So, of course, Eddie was like, okay, well, I don't want you to run away, so you got lucky last time because you ran away. He's like, so, cage match. Anyway, that brings us to this point in time where a masked person, keep in mind, Kurt Angle is faking an injury. A masked person walks down to the ring, jumps up into the cage, and stops Eddie Guerrero from winning the match. While it was neck and neck, both competitors trying to get over the top rope. And what ends up happening is Eddie ends up getting thrown to the floor, and afterwards he basically tells him, hey, look, you're not going to win, you know. And then JBL ends up winning the match and retaining his championship. Not only that, but they want to know who's under the mask because of the shenanigans that happened 2 weeks ago. They're like, okay, so who's under the mask? Oh, I don't know. Commentaries all over the place. They're like, I don't know who's under the mask. I don't understand why people have to wear a mask. Great. You know, COVID-19 all over again. But anyway, he goes ahead and he's trying to leave out the door, the cage door that, by the way, is locked. He's a dumbass because if he was any smart, while Eddie Guerrero was on the ground, he would have climbed the cage and then he would have escaped the way that he came in, but rather he's like, why is the cage door locked? Let me out. And then he just keeps shoving it and pushing it and, like, let me out. Why ain't you letting me out? Like, Kurt, we can't find the key. Anyway, he ends up finally, once Eddie gets to his feet, of course, he ends up finally leaving, and the shot that you see is Kurt Angle standing on the ramp, looking almost petrified because he sees that Eddie Guerrero has the mask that he was just wearing in his hand, realizing that it's all a ruse, that he had a cast, or for that matter, was in a wheelchair, just throwing his weight around as general manager. And then Michael Cole on commentary was like, that's Kurt Angle. He screwed us all. Well, as much as a match that was, I just appreciated if it didn't end the way that it did. Just because Eddie Guerrero got screwed out of some championship match, I guess. We're going to go over an hour, which is fine. I spent a lot of time talking about, nonsense. Give me a second to get a drink of water. And we will continue this little fiasco. Okay. Starting to lose my voice, which sort of happens every time I do these damn episodes, but that's fine. I just put my microphone closer. Now, we're going to talk about an episode of Monday Night Raw that happened 10/10/2005, where they show highlights from last week. Vince McMahon is in the ring, and this was the homecoming to the USA Network. Why? Because WWE had canceled their contract with Spike TV because of the fact that Impact Wrestling had a show on Spike TV, and it caused a wouldn't that be a conflict of interest because WWE is their competitor? I think that it would be a conflict of interest. So in the 90s, WWE used to broadcast through USA Network. The only problem with that was the network apparently didn't really agree with what it was that WWE was doing. Not really sure what they were doing, but a lot of their programming was sex, violence, drugs. A lot of their programming was, girls kissing each other. We can't have that, edgier type programming. Which reminds me, there was an announcement made that starting July 18th rather. Sometimes I get June and July mixed up. I'm not really sure why. Because I'm an idiot, probably. But anyway, July 18th. Mark your dates. Mark your calendars, rather. And mark your date. Because that's the day that Monday Night Raw comes to the USA Network. TV 14. No longer PG. TV 14. Now, if you know the difference between PG and TV 14, it means that they can say words that they couldn't say previously. It means that they can have more edgier entertainment storylines. Vince McMahon ends up saying that somebody is going to get fired because Austin stuns Vince, and then Shane, and then Stephanie, and then Linda. Men, women, and children are intimidated by me, is what Stephanie McMahon said. Why would you want to intimidate a child? That's my question to you, Stephanie McMahon. Why would you want to intimidate any children? That just makes you look like a bitch. Now, I'm never going to get sponsors. And the reason why, like I said, they returned to the USA Network. That was last week. Before, this is 10/10/2005. So last week they returned to the USA Network for the homecoming, whatever it is that they were talking about, where they basically came out and then they talked about how, it was like a 3-hour extravaganza, which Monday Night Raw nowadays is actually 3 hours, but back then it was 2 hours. It was actually like an hour and 36 minutes with like the rest of it just being commercial breaks. Because that's what Peacock says, an hour and 36 minutes. And then I'm like, all right, 90 minutes? Bet. And then afterwards, Stephanie McMahon comes out, and then she starts running her mouth and saying something along the lines of, well, Vince McMahon, like I said earlier in the night, said that someone's going to get fired. The only problem with that is, how do you... Vince McMahon during the... I know this sounds like it's going on forever, and for that matter, it's irrelevant, but it's kind of relevant to the end of the story, at least to the end of the night. He's just adding fuel to the fire. He basically came out and said, I want to know who the son of a bitch is who's responsible for stunning me, stunning my daughter, and for that matter, stunning my son and my lovely wife. But in reality, he's the one responsible, if you think about it. Because he came out to close the show, Monday Night Raw, the week before the episode that we're going to be talking about, during the homecoming. And Steve Austin apparently spoiled the homecoming, putting that in air quotes, because whenever Steve Austin came out, he said, I see that you're having a lot of fun by my expense, Vince. All the good old days whenever you would smack me around, and for that matter, I would smack you around. And he said, let me make one thing perfectly clear. I don't take orders from anybody. And then Steve Austin stuns Vince McMahon. Shane McMahon comes out and says, you can't do that to him. And then Shane McMahon gets stunned. And then Stephanie McMahon comes out. And then once she gets into the ring, she says, you little bastard or whatever, and then slaps him. And then he's like, well, I kind of wish that you wouldn't have done that. And then he ends up saying, but now I'm kind of happy that you did. And then he stuns her. And then Linda McMahon comes out, and she gets stunned too. So if anything, Steve Austin was provoked, if you think about it that way. Stephanie McMahon ends up saying, the bitch is back, basically. The wrestling here, by the way, was terrible. The segments were way too long, and just low-grade comedy. Let me just put it that way. Rob Conway versus Doink the Clown. You heard me correctly. Rob Conway versus Doink the Clown. And they're talking about in commentary how they never seen Doink for like 25 years or something. And I'm like, that's great, but is it relevant? And if you haven't seen him for like 25 years, then you obviously gave away the end of your match, because the only relevant person in this match, aside from Doink the Clown, who's not relevant and hasn't been relevant for 25 years, like they just got done saying, Rob Conway is going to clearly win this match in order to say, hey, I beat Doink the Clown. And for some reason, every hold that he would do, he would end up looking at the camera, at the referee, and everybody else and saying, look at me. So, if you've ever watched Rick and Morty has this Mises box. Whenever you press on it, there's a song on YouTube that goes with it, because someone edited a fucking song for it, because of course they did, because they were bored, I guess. But anyway, I got to listen to the song, and it drove my cousin crazy so much that she stayed out of my room. So every time that I would see her, I would put on that song, and it would go something like this. I'm Mr. Macy's, look at me, I'm Mr. Macy's, yes sirree, make a request. Macy's fulfills the request, and then it stops existing. I'm Mr. Macy's, look at me, I'm Mr. Macy's, yes sirree. So basically, the only thing that the Macy's was there to do was basically live to die, if that makes sense. And in this case it does, because it takes more than one Macy's in order to accomplish a goal in that certain episode, so much so that they're trying to kill each other just to get dead, because that's what they want. They want death. They don't want to live. Existence is pain for them. He says it in the song too. Existence is pain. And then he tries to teach Jerry how to take 2 strokes off of his golf game. You gotta square your shoulders, and then you gotta choke up on the clap, which I don't know what that means, but it was in the song. But anyway, Rob Conway versus Doink the Clown, and I felt like Rob Conway was just an earlier version of Mr. Macy's. Look at me, all that he would say. And also he hits someone's finishing maneuver from 2016, 2018, the drift away, which I thought was funny. He hit that drift away neck breaker, which is now used by Elias or Ezekiel. Triple H, he beat Ric Flair up in a brutal fashion. And then we go to Carlitos Cabana. Okay, whenever I say a brutal fashion too, JR tries to warn us that the footage that we're going to see is very graphic, but it looks like that they kind of caked a black and white filter over it so that it shows no blood, because they're PG, once again, even though I don't know, like, whether or not they're going to have to go back in their library, be like, oh, all right, boys, we're TV-14 now. Take all that off, like all those filters, like all the work that's just went into like not showing any blood and cutting out all kinds of matches, like the first blood match, that doesn't exist anymore. You're not allowed to say words like shit or bitch. Once again, I don't know who monetizes my podcast, but I'm very sorry. If you yourself monetize my podcast and you have to go back, let's say a year from now, and add a bleeping noise because I decided to say a word that I'm not supposed to say, a no-no word, or for that matter, if I end up getting a letter in the mail from the FCC, I'm blaming every one of you. I'm blaming the people who listen to this, because it's your profanity and it's your fault for all the violence in this country. Anyway, going on to Carlitos Cabana. Kurt Angle versus Shawn Michaels in a promo, slowly putting pieces together of what happened last week. Last week, as I said before, was a 3-hour extravaganza. And what ended up happening was basically Kurt Angle faced off against HBK in a Iron Man match, a 30 minutes Iron Man match. And once they tied, HBK asked Kurt Angle if he would like to maybe go for a sudden death round, and Angle apparently declined. He said, no, I'm out, I'm done, I'm good, And then the champion, John Cena, comes out after everybody else comes out, after the Big Show comes out, after Edge comes out, after, and then you see this promo that John Cena cuts that's all over YouTube, and it's easy to find, and then I'm like, oh man, I'd already seen this 100 fucking times, 100 freaking times, rather. But anyway, it's kind of like John Cena's old stick, wherever he would come out, and then he would make a rhyme or a rap pertaining to his opponent, saying something like, he told Carlito that he likes to chew on apples, but he needs to chew on these nuts, and then he pulls a Planters peanuts out of his pocket and throws them on the ground. He tells Edge that you might call yourself rated R, but I'm like a pinwheel and you can blow me. No, he's got something to do with Money in the Bank, because he had won that freaking briefcase. He was like one of the first people to ever win like the Money in the Bank briefcase. But anyway, he pulls a pinwheel out of his pocket and he's pulling all these props out of his ass. I don't know where he's getting them from, but maybe that's why everybody had to come out, because, hey, we got to stall for John Cena. Just like the 9-minute Kenzo Suzuki, whatever it was that I was talking about earlier, whenever they had to stall for like 9 minutes for John Cena to come out. He says, sudden death angle, didn't want anymore, and then a wild Big Show appears. Big Show basically comes out, he says, I had an epiphany. You know what that is? And then he says, don't worry, I'll buy you a dictionary later. He talks about Lita, who is Edge's girlfriend. He talks about, and everybody makes fun of Lita because, of course, she's the tramp, she's the hoe, she's the girl who, cheated on Matt Hardy in order to get with Edge, and Matt Hardy lost his job and he went public with it and he wasn't supposed to. But I mean, I don't know how to put it. A Triple H segment where he says he killed his best friend for being mediocre. I put a question mark there because it sounded like just a whole bunch of a madman rambling. He's like, I worship the ground that this man walked on, and I did all this and I did all that for him, and I let him sit beside me, and now he's nothing more than filth. He's dirt. He's not my best friend anymore, even though he kinda is my best friend, but he's not. He just goes on and on and on about how Ric Flair used to be his best friend, how Ric Flair used to be the man, but now Ric Flair's not the man anymore. And for Ric Flair, it's game over. So Triple H basically does exactly what his father-in-law does. He looks at the camera and he garners that deep voice. I wonder who said it first. Triple H? No, that's not it. I wonder who said it first, Donald Trump or Vince McMahon. You're fired. Victoria versus Trish Stratus in a women's championship match. And this is where Mickie James makes her debut. Because no one knows who the fuck Mickie James is. She just comes into the ring, and after Trish beats Victoria, she ends up basically saving face, saying, hey, Victoria, get off of my friend. Even though she's not a friend, she's just a psycho. And that's what she portrays. At one point in time, like 5 or 6 weeks from now, Mickie James will kiss Trish under the mistletoe. She will kidnap Trish Stratus. She does all this crazy stuff. And I thought AJ Lee was crazy, This is a whole new level of crazy. And then we get Carlito, and I hate multi-man matches. I already had a freaking headache, man. But this match just put me over the edge. We get Carlito, Kurt Angle, and Edge. And like I said, I hate multi-man matches because it's the same bullcrap, rinse and repeat. But Carlito, Kurt Angle, and Edge face off against Cena, HBK, and The Big Show. I'm going to go ahead and move on. 3.5 out of 5 stars. Was a pretty good match. Wasn't expecting the ending where Cena ends up losing to Kurt Angle. It was just a 6-man tag team match, but I hate multi-man matches. Then we get the longest segment ever. Like I said, I got a headache, and as much as I enjoy professional wrestling, I really wanted this one to be over with too. Mr. McMahon comes out, and he makes JR, Jerry Lawler, and the coach apologize to him for the actions of Steve Austin last week. Now, in case you don't know, JR, Jim Ross, good old JR, is the best friend of Steve Austin. So, once again, it's to add fuel to the fire. It's the classic bad guy getting to destroy something close to the good guy but not exactly destroying the good guy, to kind of like say something along the lines of, hey, let me give you an example. Final Fantasy VII, in case you've never played it. Tifa ends up joining Cloud and Aerith and everyone else, whose names I cannot remember, because of one thing that ends up setting her over the edge. Sephiroth, the bad guy in the series, ends up murdering her father and her mother in front of her. So it's kind of like, now you kind of have no choice but to chase me down if you don't want to look like a bitch, and then allow me to, get someone or something else that's close to you. But anyway, basically asks the coach, JR and King, to apologize, and Jerry Lawler apologizes. Mr. McMahon tells it that he can go back to the commentary desk. The coach apologizes. Mr. McMahon tells him he can go back to the commentary desk. But then we get to JR, and he apologizes, but only for the wife. He says, I do apologize that your wife was stunned. And he says, you see, JR, that's just not good enough. Because like I promised, someone was going to get fired tonight. And that's basically what he promised. If you listen to what happened earlier in the program, what I said was that McMahon said that someone was going to get fired tonight. And he ends up firing good old JR. Why? To get under the skin of Steve Austin, who was provoked. Need I remind you, he was provoked at last week's Monday Night Raw whenever he stunned Vince McMahon, because Vince McMahon was outside, out in the ring, talking shit, saying, hey, I remember beating the hell out of you, Stone Cold. And then after that, Shane came down, put his hands on Austin, and he said, hey, you can't be stunning my father now. Stephanie came down, and after a slap, Steve Austin said, boy, I really wish you wouldn't have done that, but then again, I'm kind of glad you did. And then he ends up stunning her to high hell. And then Linda McMahon comes out, and once Linda comes out, she gets stunned for her troubles as well. So anyway, hopefully I cleared up any confusion as to any stories that were put to rest last week, as well as putting to rest the story of Steve Austin and Vince McMahon. And Jim Ross ended up getting fired. It's a horrible tragedy. Not only that, but I mean, weeks later, they would also put a cinder block over his head and then crack it. And they would do all these terrible, terrible things to him just to humiliate him, just to get under the skin of Steve Austin. At least that was, kind of the driven narrative storyline. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and get the hashtag out of here. I heard that from YouTube. Don't sue me. Don't sue me. And this has been Mocha, the only podcast host who has a headache right now. Thank you all so much for joining me, and I'll see you next week. Hopefully. Provided that this doesn't kill me.